You know that app you use every single day? It's always changing, isn't it? New features pop up, bugs get squashed, the whole look and feel gets a refresh. But have you ever stopped to think about what happens to all your old data when that app updates? How does a brand new version of the code not totally break when it sees data from a year ago? Well, that's the invisible, absolutely critical challenge we're going to unpack today. You know, the ancient Greek philosopher Heraclitus really nailed it. And in the world of software, this isn't just some abstract philosophical idea, it's basically a law of survival. Applications that can't evolve, that can adapt to change, they just don't last, period. And that really is the million-dollar question. When you deploy a new version of your code, how do you make sure it can still understand all of the old data? And maybe even more importantly, how do you make sure the old code, which might still be running out there, doesn't just crash and burn when it suddenly sees data written by the new code? It's a really tricky balancing act. So here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll talk about the challenge of change itself. Then we'll dive into the nuts and bolts of encoding, and we're going to uncover some hidden flaws in formats you probably use every single day. After that, we'll get to the really elegant solution, schemas. And finally, we'll connect all these dots and see how this plays out in the real world. Okay, so every time an application's features change, its data structures often have to change right along with them. But in any large system, you can't just flip one giant switch. That would mean downtime. Instead, you do what's called a rolling upgrade, updating just one server at a time. This creates a really interesting situation. For a while, you've got both old and new versions of your code running at the same time, all trying to read and write to the exact same data. To survive this, we need two kinds of compatibility. Backward compatibility, that's usually the easy one. You just design your new code to be able to handle the old data format. But the real magic, and the part that's so much harder, is forward compatibility. This is all about teaching your old code to see a piece of data from the future, a new field it was never designed for, and not freak out. Just gracefully ignore it. So, how do we actually pull this off? Well, it all starts with a fundamental process called encoding. Think of it like packing a suitcase. You can't just shove your clothes in there, right? You have to fold them, arrange them, make them compact and easy to transport. Encoding is just how we pack our data for a journey, whether that journey is to a file on a hard drive or across a network to another continent. See, inside your application's memory, data lives in these rich, complex structures that are perfect for the CPU to work with. But to send that data literally anywhere else, it has to be translated into a flat, simple sequence of bytes. That's encoding, or as it's also called, serialization. And the reverse process, turning that sequence of bytes back into useful structures in memory, that's decoding, or deserialization. Now, there are a ton of ways to encode data. Some of them seem really easy and convenient at first, but they hide some nasty surprises. They're like little technical debt time bombs just waiting to go off, maybe years down the line. A lot of programming languages have their own built-in tools for this, like Python's Pickle. And they are so tempting to use, but honestly, they're a trap. They lock you into a single programming language, they're often super inefficient, and worst of all, they can open up massive security holes. We're talking about vulnerabilities that could let an attacker execute any code they want on your server just by sending you a cleverly crafted piece of data. So to avoid all those problems, most of us reach for formats that are language agnostic and human readable, like JSON. JSON is the workhorse of the modern web. It's easy to read, it's widely supported, but even it has some subtle flaws that can lead to bugs and serious inefficiency. For instance, JSON is kind of notorious for being ambiguous about numbers. Is it an integer or a float? It also has no way to represent raw binary data, so you're forced into these workarounds like base 64 encoding, which bloats your data by about 33% right off the bat. But the biggest, most expensive problem is that these formats are incredibly verbose. Just look at this example record. As plain old JSON text, it's 81 bytes long. Now here's the really interesting part. Even if we use a so-called binary JSON format like MessagePack, it only shrinks down to 66 bytes. Why such a small improvement? Because even in this supposedly compact binary format, you are still sending the full field names, username, favorite number, interests, over and over and over again with every single record. It's just incredibly wasteful. All that verbosity is a huge source of waste, and that waste translates directly into higher network bills and storage costs. But what if we could just get rid of those field names completely? This is where schemas come in, and let me tell you, they are an absolute game changer. Here's the key idea. A schema is a formal contract, a blueprint for the structure of your data. Think about it. If the writer and the reader both have a copy of the blueprint, the writer can just send the raw materials. The reader already knows what each piece is and exactly where it's supposed to go. You don't need to label every single thing. So let's look at a schema-based format like Apache Thrift. Instead of using the text username, the schema just assigns it a little numeric tag, like the number 1. The encoded data now only contains these tiny efficient tags instead of the full text. And look at the impact. Our record shrinks from 66 bytes all the way down to just 34. That's nearly a 50% reduction. But wait, it gets even better. Check out Apache Avro. It takes this idea one step further. The Avro schema defines the exact order of the fields. And because that order is set in stone by the schema, the encoded data doesn't need field names or tags. It's just pure data, no metadata. Just the raw values one after the other. The schema provides all the meaning, and our record is now a tiny 32 bytes. So the benefits here are just huge. Obviously, these formats are way more compact, but the schema itself also becomes precise, always up-to-date documentation for your data. It also lets you automatically check if a proposed change is going to break anything before you deploy. And here's a massive win for developers. From this one schema file, you can automatically generate type-safe code in multiple languages. This means your Python service and your Go service are guaranteed to be speaking the same language, catching errors before you even write a line of code. Okay, so these concepts are clearly powerful, but let's ground them in reality. Let's see how this actually affects the data flowing through the systems we build and use every single day. First up, databases. Here's a crucial principle. In a database, the data almost always outlives the code. Just think about a user account that was created 10 years ago. The code that originally wrote that data is long gone, replaced who knows how many times. But your brand new, modern code still has to be able to read and understand that old record perfectly. This makes robust schema evolution absolutely non-negotiable. Next, let's talk services. In a modern microservices architecture, the schema becomes a rock-solid contract between different services. As long as you evolve that contract carefully, Team A can deploy updates 5 times a day, and they will never ever break Team B's service. This is what enables different teams to move fast and evolve their systems independently. And finally, think about asynchronous systems, where messages are just sent out into a queue, with no idea who's going to pick them up or when. A sender might be on version 1, but the receiver that finally processes that message an hour later could already be on version 5. In that world, the encoded message itself is the only thing connecting them, and it has to be perfectly compatible across both time and versions. So what's the big takeaway here? The format you choose for your data isn't just some minor technical detail. It's a fundamental decision that will echo through the entire life of your application. It's the foundation that all future change is built upon. It's what determines whether evolving your system is a constant source of pain or a smooth, manageable process. So the question you have to ask yourself is this: is your data architecture built for today, or is it built for the inevitable changes of tomorrow?